I haven't recorded in a while, just because I haven't had really anything to talk about, and I've been filming some podcast episodes, so I just haven't really been focusing on this channel. But I do have a topic to talk about now that I've been meaning to talk about. I just haven't had the time to film. So let's talk about abuse and its effects on interpersonal relationships and how to identify abuse in your relationships. Now, I think the classic media perception of abuse is that it's very obvious, and that's not always the case. Abuse can be something that's gradual because a lot of the victim blaming mentality from a lot of people comes from the fact that they don't realize that abuse didn't always start off as strong as it happened as the relationship ended, or at least hopefully ended. So, for example, some of the biggest small things that really start off is just minor comments. Like minor comments here and there that really start to make you question your personal relationships with others that you've trusted. Um, for example, in my personal experience with an abusive and toxic relationship, he would constantly make questions and statements about friends that I've had for years, and put their question and their identities into question for me. And obviously, it isn't as simple as just like, oh, you should drop your friends and just hang out with me. Um, it was more of a, oh, I don't know, I just don't like how he treats you. Or like, I don't like how she talks to you over text. And just little things like that. It always starts off very small, and it puts a little question of doubt in your head. And it questions like, well, why would I hang out with these people, if they're so bad for me, and if they're so, if they're not nice to me, and even if they are the kindest of people, it can cause question because you care so much about the person that you are in the relationship and your partner that you're willing to question something as simple as a text message tone, which you can't put tone into a text message. Like, okay, or okay, that's cool. Um, there are obviously issues with perceiving these people differently. And I think that's really the main issue with abuse, is that there are so many things that you can perceive in different ways. And I think that people who abuse others are very keen into tapping into those minor insecurities. And that's another way. Tapping into your insecurities, saying things like, well, I mean, if I'm not here, like, who's going to look after you? Who's going to take care of you? And making you seem almost childlike, like you can't live without them. And that's a major thing. Like cutting yourself off from your friends and leaning more into their arms is the first step to any successful abusive and toxic relationship. As soon as you feel like you have nowhere else to go but them, you're trapped in that cycle. You're trapped in that thinking of that, I can't go anywhere else. So why should it matter? Why should it matter if he screams at me or yells at me or hits me? It doesn't matter anymore because where else can you go? And it's that isolation that causes people to stay in abusive and toxic relationships for years. And people really don't realize that. And obviously now it's being talked about much more openly. And that is one of the greatest things out there that I've seen, like socially, that we have changed as a society of recognizing that. However, there are still people out there with that stigmatism thinking that, well, if he hits you, or like if he hits your kids, then you're an awful person for staying with him. Well, that's just not true. Simply put, a lot of people feel stuck and trapped in that situation. Parents that are abused as well as their children often struggle to get out of those dynamics, and some never do. And so putting the blame on the victim for not leaving is another form of victim blaming, and forcing the objective of the victim, the person who's taken this abuse, and forcing them to obtain for their actions instead of focusing on the actual issue, the abuser. Um, I think that is really a difficult stigmatism to break because, unfortunately, however the media has displayed abusive relationships on the screen, in newspapers, in Instagram articles, like anything, is always so victim blamey to me. I think that that's one of the major issues with major news sources, is that they are always looking to victim blame, and that also happens for schools, the school systems, and work. It happens everywhere. People are belittled and they are told that maybe you're exaggerating, or he wouldn't do that, or I know him, he's not like that. And that's where the problem starts, and where we need to start working on as a society is to start trusting people who are brave enough to come out of these abusive situations, because it's almost like as a people we have decided that even if you do come out of those abusive situations, you're still going to be shamed for it, which is so just awful. However, after you come out of the situations, besides from the actual shaming that you do experience, from friends of the person, from people who are older than you, people who are more experienced in life than you, it also affects your interpersonal relationships with others. For example, when you get out of that relationship, you don't feel like yourself anymore. It's taken me months of therapy, years of thinking, like just sitting on it and climbing myself back out. And there are still obviously times that I still struggle with those personal relationships that I formed with people that I personally trust. But I still struggle to trust them. And that is one of the hardest parts of abuse that is never talked about, is the aftermath. Sure, the during is obviously awful for everyone going through it. However, the aftermath of trying to climb out of those relationships and climb back to trusting yourself again instead of having to trust others is incredibly difficult. I mean, it's just very suffocating to not be able to trust anyone anymore and have to work for it. I was a very gullible person. I still am to this day, but I think I was a little bit more gullible in a different way. Back in the beginning of my freshman year when all of this happened, and all of this stuff happened, I did talk about this, like, what everything that happened. I'm not going to go into it again. I just don't think it's necessary. But if you would like to look into it, I do a video up. So, I don't know, if you want to see it, get my views up, I guess. But I think that people don't accept that either. After getting out of the abusive relationship, and my friends never meant any harm, I know that for a fact, but it feels as if they expect you to move on faster than you're ready for. They expect it to be like, oh, okay, well, you're out of the relationship, so now we can go, like, back to, like, hanging out every day and, like, talking every day. It took months for me to be able to do that. It took months to be able to stop blaming myself for leaving them when they were telling me and constantly reminding me that this person is a bad person. Because there's a lot of guilt after having someone constantly and repeatedly tell you that they are not a good person, and when it ends badly, it's guilt, it's embarrassment, it's, it's so many things. It's a combination of so many feelings that you just can't face at once. And so it's really hard to pull yourself out of that mindset. And so if you have a friend or a family member suffering with abuse and have gotten out of an abusive relationship recently, please remember that communication is the most effective way to help them. Now, obviously, I know communication isn't exactly the easiest for everyone to do, but I would like to say that communication doesn't mean like, hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Okay. It means actually noticing things. Now, I personally have always had to, like, recognize, like, patterns in people, and that also is probably a talent of past abusive relationships as well. But for others, I understand it is kind of difficult to understand like people's patterns and people's emotions. I understand that a lot of people just don't view emotions and don't really see emotions in other people unless it's explicitly told. But with your friends that have been in abusive relationships, you really have to start looking deep and peeling back the layers that they are not really presenting outwardly. You have to recognize that they are in a hurt place right now. You need to say to them, like, hey, if you want to call or like if you want to talk or you want to hang out, we can. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. And there's no consequences either way. I'm not going to be mad. Like you have to over explain it. Which it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because no one likes talking about this. No one likes talking about their feelings. No one likes that. Feelings are gross, okay? Feelings are kind of nasty. But we need to talk about them. We need to talk about them and express what we want directly instead of beating around the bush. Because or at least in America, I'm assuming that everywhere else is the same, but I'll speak from what I know. I won't speak for others. At least in America, we are very abrupt with like how we speak. Like, okay, you want to hang out, and that's it. But I think what people don't really realize is that people who are getting out of these relationships have lost that opportunity, have lost that feeling of connection for so long that it's almost like reintroducing someone how to walk. It's like getting in a car crash and having to learn to walk again. That's exactly how it's my favorite analogy, not analysis, learn words. It's my favorite analogy towards these situations. Because it's exactly like that. Getting re-socialized after months of just being talked down to and talked at is really hard, and not having your emotions heard and not hearing anything back from them and feeling just shut off from everything. You have to readjust to being heard. And it's awful. It's so bad. It's so, you feel like a burden. The other person will constantly feel like a burden. I still feel like a burden to this day. I don't think that any of my friends enjoy talking to me because of those words that he had put into my head and those thoughts that he put into my head. And realistically, I understand that, but I think if I could send everyone or anyone who has suffered with any past trauma of not being heard and not being listened to, I would say that we can't assume what anyone else is thinking. We can't hear anyone else's thoughts. We're not mind readers. And assuming that your friends don't like you, or they don't want to hang out with you, or they don't enjoy your company, or they would rather, jump off a bridge and hang out with you. You don't know that unless they've explicitly told you that. Overthinking is a huge problem that I still suffer with a lot. I still struggle with overthinking a ton. But overthinking leads you to a lot of awful places that you would probably rather not visit. So overthinking is really hard. I am not good at coping with it. I've been told that journaling can help. I've been told that writing and drawing and singing, those are kind of my vices. But you have to figure out how to get up from that. So please keep in mind, if you have anyone or anything or any person in your life that has been suffering with abuse, please make sure to support them after they get out and while they're in it. Whether they might appreciate it or not in the moment is up to them, but please just keep trying and don't get annoyed, because if you see abusive tendencies, you have to realize that their mind is not in the greatest state. I have left the abuse hotline and a couple other hotlines in the description. If you are in trouble and if you need help, please reach out. I know this is probably not going to get very much reach. My YouTube videos normally don't. But if you are in trouble, please contact these hotlines, and these are verified hotlines that do work. They're not leading to the police. They're not leading to anything. And please also check out some resources that I'm also going to leave in the description about how to treat people that have worked through and worked up the courage. Because while I can recommend my personal recommendations, I am not a doctor, I am not a therapist, I am not a professional. So please listen to the therapists and professionals that I do leave and link into the description. Thank you for watching, and that will be all. So,